Imagine a land of sprawling plantations, endless fields of sugarcane and coffee, where the wealth of an entire nation was built on the backs of people stolen from their homes thousands of miles away. Brazil, in the 19th century, relied heavily on enslaved Africans, so much so that nearly 40% of all Africans brought to the Americas ended up here. Slavery was not just part of life, it was the economy itself, shaping society, politics, and culture for centuries. Even when the international slave trade was officially banned in 1850, the demand for enslaved labor remained relentless, forcing countless men, women, and children into lives of unimaginable hardship. But behind the statistics, behind the numbers, were real human stories, stories of courage, resistance, and survival. One of the most extraordinary among them belongs to Roque José Florêncio, known as Seca, chosen for his remarkable strength and resilience. He was forced into a system that tried to control every aspect of his life, including his very ability to create life itself. Yet, despite unimaginable oppression, Seca's story is one of determination, leadership, and the enduring human spirit. In this video, we will journey through his life from the brutal realities of forced labor and reproduction to his acts of defiance, the communities he inspired, and the legacy he left behind. You will see how one man's story can illuminate an entire chapter of history that is often overlooked in textbooks. If you want to uncover this hidden history and witness the remarkable life of Seca, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that challenges what we think we know about the past. Trust me, you won't want to skip a second of this journey. This is the story of resilience in the face of oppression, and it begins now. As Brazil's plantations thrived, a hidden and painful system quietly dictated the lives of thousands of enslaved men and women. A system designed not only to exploit their labor, but to control the very continuation of their existence. Among the rolling hills and vast coffee fields, enslaved individuals were forced into a life that left almost no part of their humanity untouched, where the expectation of producing children was as relentless as the daily toil in the sun-soaked fields. These children, born into bondage, were immediately enveloped in the harsh realities of slavery, their futures predetermined by the needs of plantation owners who measured their value in terms of labor and obedience rather than in human dignity. It was a cycle designed to perpetuate itself, a cruel machinery that treated generations of people as commodities. Yet within this system, small acts of resistance and humanity quietly endured. In the midst of this oppressive structure, individuals like Seca emerged not as passive victims, but as figures of extraordinary resilience. Selected for his remarkable physical stature and health, he was forced into a role that would define not only his life, but the lives of hundreds of children who would bear his lineage under conditions imposed upon them without choice. His existence became a living testament to the intersections of power, oppression, and survival, and through him, the brutality of the breeding system becomes painfully tangible. Seca's life was shaped by the daily impossibilities of slavery, long hours under a scorching sun, strict oversight, and the constant erosion of personal freedom. Yet, within the confines of this system, he sought ways to maintain agency, teaching his children survival skills and imparting lessons that went beyond mere obedience, guiding them toward knowledge that could empower them in a world determined to suppress them. The children themselves became silent witnesses to a life of extremes, born into a world where love, family, and identity were constantly under threat. Their early years were dominated by labor and supervision, and as they grew, many were funneled into the same system that had birthed them, trained to serve and, in some cases, to reproduce in turn. The plantation was both home and prison, a place where every action was monitored. And yet, even in these conditions, moments of care and instruction emerged, often quietly, away from the eyes of those who sought to exploit. Pater Seca's influence was a small but vital counterpoint to the dehumanizing forces around him, a reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, human beings find ways to nurture, educate, and resist. This forced reproduction system was not simply a historical footnote, it was a mechanism that shaped communities, altered the demographic structure of regions, and left enduring legacies that ripple through generations. Every child born into this cycle carried not only the weight of enslavement, but also the stories and survival strategies of their parents. Threads of knowledge and resilience woven into the fabric of lives constrained by violence yet refusing to be erased entirely. Through Pater Seca's life, the intricate and often horrifying workings of this system are made vividly human, a story of endurance, defiance, and the subtle ways in which enslaved people sought to claim dignity within a world that sought to deny it. In witnessing these generations, one sees the duality of slavery, the crushing weight of control, and the sparks of human strength that persisted despite it. The forced reproduction system may have been designed to sustain the labor force, but it also unintentionally revealed the persistence of human agency, the ability to teach, guide, and influence, even when every aspect of one's life was under the shadow of coercion. Pater Seca's story, embedded in this broader context, transforms statistics and historical policies into a vivid narrative of lived experience, highlighting the ways enslaved people navigated an impossible existence while planting seeds of resilience that would endure long after the chains of slavery were broken. In the heart of São Paulo, in the year 1828, a child was born into a world that would demand every ounce of his strength and courage before he even understood the weight of life itself. This child, Roque José Florêncio, would later be known as Pater Seca, a name that carried whispers of fear, respect, and legend across plantations where his presence loomed larger than any man's. From the very beginning, his life was marked by separation. Torn from his family at a tender age, he was thrust into a reality defined by the relentless demands of slavery, where personal connections were severed, identities erased, and childhood innocence extinguished almost as soon as it began. The details of his parents, the lullabies that once cradled him, and the embrace of siblings became distant echoes, memories swallowed by the machinery of an oppressive system that saw children not as people, but as future laborers and instruments of production. Yet even in the midst of such dehumanization, Pater Seca possessed traits that set him apart. Towering in stature, with strength that was both admired and feared, and health that promised resilience against the harsh conditions of plantation life, he was singled out by those who saw him not as a boy, but as a tool, a breeding slave, chosen for the cruel purpose of perpetuating the labor force. His physical gifts, once natural and free, became the very reason his life was constrained, manipulated, and closely monitored. The title of breeding slave carried with it not only relentless expectations but a life where personal freedom, choice, and family were subordinated to the economic interests of his enslavers. Every movement, every act of strength, and every potential child became a measure of his value, a cold calculation by those who profited from the exploitation of his body and spirit. Despite these grim circumstances, there were glimpses of the man he would become, glimpses of the intelligence, resilience, and courage that would define his life. Even as a young man, the awareness of his own power, physical, mental, and moral, began to emerge. It was not just his size or endurance that set him apart, but a presence, a charisma that allowed him to influence those around him in ways his enslavers could never fully control. He learned quickly, observed sharply, and understood the intricate networks of control and resistance within the plantation world. Where others saw absolute domination, he glimpsed the possibility of agency, however limited, and he nurtured it quietly, storing knowledge and strategies that would later empower not only himself, but the generations of children whose lives were intertwined with his. Pata Seca's story at this stage is a study in contrasts: the harsh imposition of a system designed to erase individuality versus the emergence of a person whose spirit could not be fully broken. His early experiences underlined the cruel arithmetic of slavery, where survival demanded compliance, yet life demanded more. The cultivation of resilience, the preservation of hope, and the capacity to act within impossible constraints, each day brought labor, scrutiny, and unchosen responsibilities. Yet it also forged the mental and physical discipline that would later define his remarkable life. The boy born in 1828, separated from his family and thrust into the role of breeding slave, would grow into a man whose story transcended the brutality imposed upon him. Pata Seca became a living testament to the ways in which human strength, both physical and moral, can persist, adapt, and resist even in circumstances calculated to annihilate it. His extraordinary stature, his remarkable endurance, and his sharp mind would not merely ensure his survival. They would shape the legacy of hundreds of children, influence communities of resistance, and leave an indelible mark on the history of Brazil. In the quiet moments of reflection and teaching, in the subtle ways he guided and protected those around him, the boy separated from his family became a figure whose life embodied the tension between oppression and agency, and whose story would resonate far beyond the confines of the plantations that once sought to define him entirely. As Pata Seca grew into adulthood, the full weight of the life imposed upon him became impossible to ignore. His extraordinary physical strength, once a source of personal pride and silent defiance, was now harnessed in a way that stripped him of autonomy. For he was compelled to fulfill a purpose that was determined entirely by the plantation owners, who saw him as a means rather than a man. Over the years, he fathered around 249 children, a staggering number that reflected both the cruelty of the forced procreation system and the relentless exploitation of his body and vitality. Each child born was immediately drawn into the machinery of bondage, their lives predetermined by circumstances they could never choose. Yet their existence was also a testament to the complex, painful interconnections of family, survival, and resilience in the enslaved community. The weight of this reality is difficult to imagine. Day after day, season after season, Pata Seca moved through the plantations, performing laborious tasks under the scorching sun while also carrying the burden of being a living instrument of reproduction. The women who bore his children were themselves trapped in the same cycle of oppression, their bodies and lives equally controlled by those who profited from the system. Yet amidst this unbearable oppression, Pata Seca found ways to assert fragments of his humanity. Though the circumstances dictated that his children were born into bondage, he took care to teach some of them essential skills for survival: reading and awareness of the world around them, instilling knowledge that could give them a chance, however small, to navigate the dangers imposed upon them. The plantation was a place of constant oversight and strict regulation. Yet within these boundaries, Pata Seca's presence became a source of both fear and respect. His children, scattered across the plantation and beyond, were often taken from him, sent to serve in the main house or trained for labor elsewhere. But the echoes of his influence persisted. Stories passed down through generations recall his quiet guidance, his subtle teachings, and the ways in which he encouraged resilience in the next generation. Even though his life had been largely dictated by others, he managed to carve out spaces of agency and connection, transforming the harsh reality of his circumstances into moments of education, mentorship, and protection for those he could influence. Pata Seca's role in the forced procreation system illustrates not only the brutal mechanics of slavery, but also the ways in which enslaved people resisted and navigated these systems. Every child he fathered was, in the eyes of the plantation owners, another unit of labor, another tool for economic gain. Yet to Pata Seca, these children were far more than statistics. They were living extensions of his presence, carriers of knowledge, skill, and survival instincts. The paradox of his life was stark. While he had been reduced to a function within a cruel system, he also became a central figure whose legacy shaped countless lives and influenced communities that sought freedom, guidance, and protection from the unrelenting oppression around them. Even in the face of overwhelming control and exploitation, Peter Seca's story reflects the complexity of human resilience. The sheer number of children he fathered under such oppressive circumstances is a record of endurance, survival, and an unwillingness to be wholly defined by the cruelty imposed upon him. His life demonstrates how, even within systems designed to dehumanize and dominate, individuals could find ways to impart wisdom, maintain agency, and sow the seeds of hope for future generations. In the long shadow of forced labor and enforced reproduction, Peter Seca's existence stands as both a testament to the cruelty of the system and a profound illustration of the capacity for human strength, care, and resistance to endure against unimaginable odds. Even in the shadow of a life imposed by others, Peter Seca refused to let the cruelty of the plantations extinguish the essence of who he was, or the potential of those who carried a part of him within them. Among the hundreds of children he fathered, he quietly nurtured those whom he could guide, teaching them skills that went far beyond mere survival under the overseer's gaze. Literacy, for instance, was a forbidden door in many plantations, a tool that could empower enslaved people to navigate a world determined to deny them knowledge and autonomy. Yet Peter Seca found ways to impart this knowledge, showing his children the power of reading and understanding beyond the immediate brutality that surrounded them, offering a map of possibilities even in a life designed to limit them to labor and obedience. Alongside letters and lessons, he taught them how to defend themselves, to fight not just with weapons but with awareness, strategy, and the courage to protect themselves and others in a world where threats were constant and often deadly. Peter Seca's influence extended beyond his immediate family. He was part of larger networks of resistance that sought to reclaim fragments of freedom and dignity amidst the overwhelming oppression of slavery. Quilombos, communities established by runaway slaves in remote and often inhospitable areas, became both sanctuaries and symbols of defiance, and he participated in their formation and defense. These were not merely hiding places. They were spaces where knowledge, culture, and leadership could flourish outside the control of plantation owners. And Peter Seca's involvement in these communities reflected both his courage and his determination to build alternatives for those who had no choice but to survive under brutal conditions. Through these actions, he helped create pockets of autonomy, places where enslaved people could organize, share strategies, and preserve their humanity in the face of systemic violence and exploitation. The lessons he imparted to his children carried the weight of experience, necessity, and hope. Each skill, each story, each piece of knowledge was a thread connecting generations, a legacy of resilience carefully woven into lives that began under the harshest of circumstances. These acts were quiet rebellions in themselves, subtle yet profound assertions of agency that refused to let slavery define the entirety of human potential. Peter Seca's life illustrates the tension between imposed roles and the inner life of resistance. While the plantation sought to reduce him to a tool for reproduction and labor, he used every possible moment to build strength, intelligence, and autonomy into his children, preparing them to navigate a world that might never fully recognize their worth. Participation in revolts and collective action was another dimension of his defiance. The plantations were arenas not only of forced labor but of strategic resistance, and Peter Seca's leadership and courage inspired others to challenge the structures that sought to dominate them. While historical documents may be sparse, oral histories and family accounts speak to his role in coordinating and supporting uprisings, guiding those around him with knowledge and bravery that transcended the individual and impacted entire communities. In these moments, He demonstrated that resistance was not only possible but necessary, and that even within the confines of oppression, individuals could assert influence, safeguard knowledge, and shape the futures of generations to come. Through his teachings, his participation in resistance, and the careful nurturing of skills and knowledge, Pater Seca transformed a life designed to dehumanize him into a narrative of empowerment, endurance, and hope. His story is a reminder that even in the most constrained circumstances, human beings can create meaning, pass down wisdom, and cultivate resilience that survives far beyond the reach of those who sought to suppress it, leaving a legacy that continues to inspire and illuminate the strength of the human spirit against overwhelming adversity. Amid the relentless demands of the plantations and the immense weight of a life defined by exploitation, Pater Seca found a rare and precious opportunity for connection, love, and family when he met Palmyra, a young woman whose skills as a healer were renowned among those who lived under the harsh realities of bondage. Their meeting was a small spark of humanity in a world often devoid of compassion, a moment in which two lives, shaped by suffering yet resilient in spirit, found one another and created a bond that transcended the cruelty surrounding them. Palmyra, with her knowledge of herbs, remedies, and care for the sick, brought not only practical skill but a gentle strength that complemented Pater Seca's formidable presence. And together they began to cultivate a life that was, in its own quiet way, an assertion of their dignity and humanity. Unlike the children Pater Seca fathered under coercion, the family he built with Palmyra was born from choice, mutual respect, and the desire to create a household that offered moments of normalcy, love, and care. They had 9 children together, each one nurtured with attention and guidance that reflected the values they sought to instill despite the limitations imposed by the society in which they lived, in the midst of a world that sought to reduce human beings to labor and numbers. Pater Seca and Palmyra's household became a sanctuary, a place where children could grow with knowledge, affection, and a sense of belonging. Palmyra's expertise as a healer meant that the health and well-being of their family were carefully tended, and Pater Seca's experience, strength, and wisdom provided protection, guidance, and lessons in resilience that went far beyond the immediate circumstances of survival. This family life was not merely a private refuge. It was also a quiet act of defiance. In creating a household built on care and mutual support, Pater Seca and Palmyra challenged the idea that enslaved people existed solely for the labor and benefit of others, asserting instead the value of personal bonds, nurturing, and education. Their children were taught skills, awareness, and knowledge that could equip them to navigate a world structured against them, blending the practical lessons of survival with the intangible inheritance of love, dignity, and a sense of identity. Each day spent together, each moment of shared laughter, each lesson passed down quietly within the walls of their home, became an affirmation that even in oppressive conditions, it was possible to cultivate spaces where human connection could thrive. The creation of this family also reflected a broader understanding of legacy. While Pater Seca had already left an indelible mark through the children he fathered under duress, his life with Palmyra added another dimension, one in which intentionality, care, and emotional connection shaped a lineage capable of carrying forward values, traditions, and the knowledge necessary to survive and resist systemic oppression. Their household became a microcosm of what life could be when guided by choice rather than coercion, a small but potent example of the power of human agency even within systems designed to erase it. Through the story of Pater Seca and Palmyra, the reader or viewer witnesses the profound resilience of human spirit against the backdrop of a life filled with forced labor, exploitation, and systemic control. The creation of a family grounded in love, skill, and mutual respect illuminates the capacity for hope and humanity to endure. It shows that even amidst the most trying circumstances, people can cultivate bonds that nurture, educate, and inspire, offering a legacy that transcends the brutality of the times and reverberates across generations as a testament to enduring strength, care, and the pursuit of a life that affirms dignity above oppression. Pata Seca's life spanned a period of extraordinary transformation in Brazil, a nation shifting from the rigid hierarchies of colonial rule and slavery to the complexities of a modern republic. And in witnessing these changes, he became both a participant in and a living chronicle of history. Born in 1828, he endured the harsh realities of slavery during its final decades. Yet he lived long enough to see its formal abolition in 1888, a monumental event that reshaped the social and economic fabric of the country. The transition from bondage to freedom was not instantaneous, and for Pata Seca and countless others, the world remained a place of challenge, adaptation, and survival even after emancipation. But the very fact that he experienced both sides of this divide gave his life a depth and perspective that few could claim. During his lifetime, Brazil itself underwent profound political transformations. The monarchy fell and the republic was established in 1889, ushering in new governmental structures, civic debates, and shifts in societal power. Pata Seca witnessed presidents rise and fall, revolutions stir, and regional uprisings alter the course of national policy. While he may have lived far from the corridors of power, the impact of these events was immediate and tangible. The laws, taxes, and economic policies shaped the daily lives of freed people, determined access to land and employment, and influenced how communities of formerly enslaved individuals could sustain themselves and thrive. His understanding of these changes, informed by decades of personal experience and leadership within his own circles, positioned him not merely as an observer, but as someone whose insight and actions resonated within the evolving social landscape. Beyond politics, Pata Seca's life intersected with the dramatic expansion of Brazil's coffee economy, which became a cornerstone of the nation's wealth in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He witnessed the influx of trade, the mechanization of plantations, and the rise of export markets that connected Brazil to global economies, all while the legacy of slavery and forced labor continued to shape labor dynamics and community structures. These economic shifts brought both opportunity and challenge, redefining the lives of families and communities that had survived centuries of oppression. And Pata Seca's own experience rooted in strength, resilience, and leadership allowed him to navigate these transformations with a combination of pragmatism and foresight. Cultural developments also colored his long life, from the religious celebrations that infused daily routines with communal meaning to the subtle preservation of African traditions among freed communities. Pata Seca observed the interplay of continuity and change, the ways in which identity, memory, and creativity could survive systemic attempts at erasure. His involvement in community rituals, teachings to his children, and participation in collective actions reflected a nuanced understanding of culture as both a tool for survival and a form of resistance. Wars, including regional conflicts and larger geopolitical struggles, punctuated his story as well, leaving indelible marks on the society he inhabited. Pata Seca lived through times when the stability of life was constantly threatened, when families were uprooted, and when survival demanded adaptability, strategy, and courage. Yet in every instance, his presence, knowledge, and leadership influenced those around him, shaping the responses of his children, his community, and the networks of formerly enslaved individuals seeking autonomy and dignity. In the span of more than a century, Pata Seca witnessed Brazil evolve from a society rooted in slavery to a modern nation defined by commerce, politics, and cultural plurality. His life bridges two worlds, one of extreme oppression and one of emerging opportunity, and through his experiences, we gain a deeply human perspective on the sweeping changes that defined the country. Every triumph and tragedy he observed, every revolution and reform, became part of a living memory, a testament to resilience and continuity, and a reminder that the arc of history is shaped not only by leaders and governments, but by the ordinary and extraordinary lives of those who endure, adapt, and preserve humanity through times of unimaginable change. Seca passed away in 1958, reportedly at the remarkable age of 130, leaving behind a legacy that continues to resonate with his descendants and the communities that remember him. His life, spanning more than a century, was a living chronicle of resilience, courage, and perseverance in the face of unrelenting oppression. From the early days of his youth, torn from his family and forced into slavery, to the later years in which he witnessed Brazil transform politically, socially, and economically, Seca's story embodies both the profound brutality of slavery and the extraordinary capacity of the human spirit to endure. His children, both those born under coercion and those raised within the family he created with Palmyra, carried forward his lessons in survival, literacy, self-defense, and resilience, ensuring that his influence extended far beyond his own lifetime. In reflecting on Seca's life, one cannot ignore the stark realities he endured: the exploitation of his body, the relentless demands of plantation labor, and the moral weight of a system that forced reproduction as a tool of economic gain. Yet, within these constraints, he found ways to assert agency, protect his children, educate them, and participate in acts of resistance that strengthened communities of enslaved and later freed individuals. His involvement in quilombos, the networks of runaway slaves, and his role in revolts illustrate a determination to challenge oppression even when the odds were overwhelmingly against him. Through these actions, Seca helped shape the contours of freedom and self-determination for those around him, leaving a lasting imprint on the social and cultural landscape of Brazil. The fact that he lived through momentous historical events: abolition, the establishment of the Republic, wars, economic transformations, and political revolutions gives his life an extraordinary scope. Seca was not merely a witness. He was an active participant in the ways his community navigated these changes, and his experiences offer a unique window into the human dimensions of history often lost in textbooks or official records. His story reminds us that history is not only the tale of leaders and governments, but also the lived experiences of individuals whose resilience, knowledge, and courage quietly shape societies over generations. Today, descendants of Seca continue to honor his memory, preserving photographs, heirlooms, and stories that testify to a life of unimaginable hardship yet remarkable influence. Local communities remember him as a towering figure, both physically and morally, whose presence shaped the social fabric around him. His legacy is a reminder of the enduring impact that enslaved individuals had on Brazil's development, not only through labor but through the transmission of knowledge, culture, and resilience that survived despite centuries of systemic oppression. As we reflect on his extraordinary journey, we are reminded of the importance of remembering and honoring the lives of those who endured the harshest conditions yet contributed profoundly to the shaping of history. Seca's story is a testament to strength, hope, and the human capacity to persevere and protect what is most valuable: family, knowledge, and dignity. Thank you for watching this story unfold. And if you want to learn more about hidden histories and remarkable figures like Seca, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so we continue sharing these important stories with you. Your support helps keep the memory and lessons of these extraordinary lives alive for generations to come.